Hello, my name's Andy. Welcome to episode 6 of Keeping Water. In this episode I'll be taking a look at the food my fish are given and how I feed them. I'll also be taking a look at the fish's behaviour and how that affects the way they feed and the way I offer food to them. Getting feeding right is obviously important for both the growth and the health of the fish, and also the quality of the water, and is something I'm planning to get more organised about over the next 12 months. I use 4 types of food during most of the year. The main food I use is Orchard Fisheries colour and growth koi pellets. I use 11mm and 6mm sizes. I began using them on a recommendation and have had no reason to stop. The fish have grown well and I see no signs of excessive waste. I also intermittently feed them bloodworm. All the fish in the pond love these, and their introduction usually prompts a fairly rapid feeding response, especially from the rudd. I also have some Cockney Koi 4mm pellets, which I bought as an option for the rudd, but they aren't particularly popular with any of the fish. I also occasionally use flake food, which the rudd will eat, but they're not that keen, and it's a little impractical for pond use. Finally, during the winter I'll offer some sinking wheat germ pellets. As I mentioned in episode 4, I'm not very organised about the amounts I'm feeding. With lockdown and increased working from home, I have developed a reasonably regular pattern of 4 feeds a day. At each feed I give about this amount of 11mm pellets, and then either these 6mm pellets or these 4mm pellets as well. About 1 to 2 times a week I'll also give them 4 cubes of bloodworm. As the weather cools, I'll reduce the number of times I feed rather than the amount I give. I'm not very scientific about it, and rather than going by water temperature, I judge feeding by the fish's response to food. As anyone who watched episode 5 will know, I get a fair amount of uneaten pellets in the skimmer, although this may be more to do with the speed the water flow sends the pellets into the skimmer's direction and the fish's nervousness than them not wanting to actually eat. I have approaches to address this, as I'll show you later. Feeding is not only a way of meeting your fish's nutritional needs, but also an opportunity to observe and interact with them. Using floating pellets to entice the fish to the surface of the water is the best way to achieve this. Many pond keepers find, especially with koi, that fish then respond to their presence by the pond and even feed from their hand. My fish aren't quite like that. As I've mentioned a number of times, my fish are easily spooked, and although I'm not trying to get them to hand feed, I would like them to be a little more confident when I'm feeding them. I've tried a number of techniques, feeding at set times, from a set position, etc., but their confidence doesn't consistently improve. They do feed from the surface, although mainly if they can't see me or I'm far enough back from the edge of the pond. This reluctance to feed from the surface for long periods is why I feed the larger pellets, as the carp get more nutrition for less time at the surface. The tench will also come to the surface to feed, especially the largest one, although they tend to be even more nervous than the carp, and it's not the most natural way of feeding for them. Tench, and to a lesser degree carp, feed predominantly off the lake bed in the wild. A tench's mouth is best designed to sift around the silt at the bottom of a body of water and sieve out insect life and plant matter it can then eat. Although, even in the wild, tench will feed in the upper layers of the water, especially amongst plants. This is rare and they are not so adept at doing so. Carp feed throughout the water column in the wild, taking insects off the surface and food items from mid-water. However, they spend a majority of their time, like tench, sifting through the detritus on the bottom for any foodstuff they can find. Their mouths, like tench, are designed for doing this, both in terms of the way it functions and also as it's mostly downwards facing. Although carp, especially when confident, feed well from the surface, and certainly more effectively than tench, they still feed more easily from the bottom and will also appear more confident while doing so, as the risk from predators is lower. So, I have nervous fish who are happier and better designed to feed from the bottom. However, as I've said, there are benefits in encouraging surface feeding, and so therefore the majority of food I give is floating. There are a number of ways I can introduce food into the pond without spooking them too much. For instance, staying far back from the pond, or even throwing in pellets from the conservatory, which I often do on rainy days. However, there are times when even this doesn't work, and the fish either won't come to the surface or will not come for long. One of the positives about the circulation in the pond is that any uneaten food naturally flows to the skimmer. Unfortunately, this means the fish don't have too long to get it, so can miss out if nervous. One way I give the fish a helping hand is to throw food close enough to the marginal plants, so they stick in them and can resist the flow for longer, giving the fish more time to get to the pellets. This builds on their natural behaviour of both eating plant matter and exploring within it for more natural food. The fish are often most nervous after pond and filter cleaning, especially if I used a net in the pond, and if there's been a lot of activity in the garden, including when I film, or if a heron has visited. At these times I ensure continued feeding by using sinking pellets. Not really wanting to buy different types of pellets, there's a simple way I use of turning floaters into sinkers. There are a number of ways to do this, but the method I prefer is to use a large syringe. You can use an angler's pellet pump, but a syringe is cheaper and works just as well. Firstly, take your floating pellets and put them in the syringe. Place the plunger in and push out as much of the air as possible, taking care not to crush the pellets. Then draw up some water to about 4 times the depth of the pellets. Push out any remaining air and then cover the end of the syringe. Pull back on the plunger, releasing to check if or how many of the pellets have begun sinking. This method works by forcing water into and air out of the pellets. Then pour out the water and the pellets are ready to use. While filming the fish for these videos, it's been interesting to have a closer look at how the fish behave while eating. One of the impressions I'd formed about the carp was that the mirror ate first and ate more than the common, in spite of it being the slightly smaller fish. The filming not only confirmed this, but showed that the mirror actually eats a lot more than the common does. It should be noted that I tended to not feed the fish prior to filming, so that they would be at their hungriest. In this clip, the common comes to have a look at the food, but declines to eat any. The mirror follows it away, but will soon return. The common glides past again, following the mirror, but although tempted, still doesn't eat. The mirror comes back again, picks up a couple of pellets, but again the common stays away. The common is still hesitant, however the mirror shows no such nervousness and makes sure it's there first. After a few more passes and pickups by the mirror, the common finally shows a closer interest, but by this point all the pellets had gone. After a short break, I put some more pellets in. The result was the same. In came the probably quite full mirror, but no signs of the common. Still chewing, the mirror returns. The common follows again and looks interested, but doesn't feed. This repeats a number of times again. At long last, the common finally picks up one of the pellets. Although this example shows an extreme difference between their feeding, a similar pattern emerged whenever I filmed the common and mirror eating. common comes back again, looking interested, but the mirror, still chewing, makes sure it gets there first. Rudd are equipped with their upward-facing mouths to feed in the middle and upper parts of the water column on plant matter and insect life. They are particularly confident and skilled at feeding from the surface, especially at catching flies and other insects. However, just as tench sometimes ignore their specialism to feed from the surface, the rudd also feed from the bottom. While filming the carp segment you've just watched, the rudd, well before the common braved it, frequently nipped and pecked away at the pellets. While I don't provide the rudd with food just for them on a daily basis, their favourite food is definitely bloodworm, and they keenly eat them in a number of ways. Firstly, as the cubes are still a little frozen when they are thrown into the pond, the rudd's starting point is to take the initial single worms that drift free as the cubes begin to thaw. The second method, as the cubes become softer, is to peck away at them themselves and then collect any single worms that break off as a result. They then start to rip the cubes apart. Those two methods only work before the carp move on to the bloodworm cubes. The carp also love bloodworm, although once again the common is less confident than the mirror. As the carp chew the mass of bloodworms, individual worms escape through their gills and out of their mouths. This gives the rudd their third way of getting their favourite food. They follow the carp and catch the worms as the larger fish lose the tiny morsels. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Keeping Water. Please leave any questions or feedback you have in the comment section below. I'd be really grateful for a like and a subscription if you've enjoyed this episode and would like to watch more. In the next episode of Keeping Water, I'll be addressing the most asked question people have had for me since I first made my pond. Why no koi? If you have any other questions for me, please feel free to ask and I may be able to also cover them next week. With autumn on the way, future episodes will soon be covering how I prepare the plants for winter, physical checks I make on the fish, a larger pre-winter clean I complete, and any ad hoc developments that come up. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.